She was living two completely different lives. By day, she was a devoted girlfriend of 4 years. By night, she was someone else entirely. And when a positive pregnancy test appeared on her bathroom floor at 6 in the morning, she made a calculation that would destroy everyone around her, including herself. I'm Emma, your storyteller, and what you're about to hear is the kind of story that will make you question everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and the price we pay for our lies. This is the story of how one woman's desperate need for excitement and validation turned into a nightmare she could never escape. Her name was Amy, and at 24 years old, she was convinced she had her life completely figured out. She'd been with Colton for 4 years. He was stable, responsible, the kind of man who had his career on track, a nice apartment, and a plan for the future. On the surface, everything looked perfect. But here's the thing about perfection. It can feel like a prison when you're not paying attention. Amy worked part-time in administration. Nothing glamorous, but enough to cover her personal expenses while Colton handled the bigger bills. He rent, the groceries, the utilities, all of it. In her mind, this was an ideal arrangement. She got to keep her independence, keep her money for herself, and enjoy the comfort of someone else taking care of the heavy lifting. The problem was that Amy had started to feel invisible. Colton loved her. There's no doubt about that. But his love felt predictable. Their dates were always at the same restaurants. Their conversations always circled back to the same topics: mortgages, retirement plans, when they'd start thinking about children. The spark that had drawn them together in those early years had become something routine, something comfortable. And for someone like Amy, comfort felt dangerously close to boredom. She found herself wondering, where was the passion? Where were the butterflies? When had her boyfriend stopped making her feel like she was someone worth pursuing? Then Trevor walked into her life. He came through her best friend's boyfriend's social circle, just a casual introduction at a group hangout. But there was something different about him from the moment they started talking. He actually listened. He remembered things she said. When she told a story, he hung on every word like it was the most interesting thing he'd ever heard. He made her laugh. He complimented her in ways that felt genuine, not automatic. With Colton, conversations felt like checking items off a list. With Trevor, talking felt like falling. At first, Amy told herself it was innocent, just friendly conversations at group gatherings, a little flirting that made her feel alive again. But then Trevor started asking her to coffee. Just the two of them. And instead of saying no, Amy said yes, because a part of her had been desperate for someone to make her feel special again. She rationalized it. Everyone needs friends outside their relationship, right? There was nothing wrong with having a male friend who appreciated her, who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and her life. This wasn't betrayal. This was just filling a void. But then she noticed herself being more secretive about it. She stopped mentioning Trevor to Colton. She deleted their text conversations. She made sure they never posted anything on social media together. And when Colton started asking questions about where she was going, who she was spending time with, Amy didn't answer honestly. Instead, she got defensive. She turned it around on him. "You're being paranoid," she'd say. "Why don't you trust me? You're so controlling." She made him feel guilty for even questioning her. And meanwhile, she was meeting Trevor for lunches, for coffee dates, for long walks that felt like romantic outings with someone else. The emotional connection between them had become intense, way more intense than anything she'd felt with Colton in months. Trevor made her feel desired, spontaneous, like she was worth fighting for. With Colton, she felt taken for granted, like he assumed she'd always be there, so he didn't need to keep trying. She didn't realize that what she was doing to Colton, gaslighting him, making him doubt his own instincts, weaponizing their intimacy by being cold with him while passionate with someone else, was a form of cruelty. She just knew that it felt powerful. It felt intoxicating. And then things went too far. The night that Amy and Trevor became physically intimate, she wasn't thinking about Colton. She wasn't thinking about the commitment she'd made or the life she'd built with someone else. All she could think about was how alive she felt, how desired, how this was everything she'd been missing. After that first time, Amy told herself it was a one-time mistake, a moment of weakness that wouldn't happen again. But that was a lie she told herself almost immediately before breaking that lie. After that first night, she couldn't stay away from Trevor. She was living a double life, and honestly, she was enjoying every minute of it. The thrill of sneaking around, the rush of almost getting caught, the intoxicating feeling of having two men who wanted her. It was addictive. She started being deliberately distant with Colton, picking fights over small things so she'd have an excuse to leave and meet Trevor. When Colton tried to plan romantic dates or surprise her with thoughtful gifts, Amy found reasons to criticize. Too cheesy, trying too hard, not spontaneous enough. She could manufacture disappointment out of thin air because everything he did felt forced compared to the spontaneous chemistry she had with Trevor. The gaslighting got worse. Colton would say, "You seem different. You're always on your phone. You're pulling away from me." And Amy would flip it around immediately. "You're being paranoid. You're so insecure. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, instead of working all the time, I wouldn't need to find conversation elsewhere." She made him question his own perception of reality. She made him doubt what was happening right in front of his face. And the sick part? She was getting off on it. She liked the power of making him feel crazy while she was doing exactly what he suspected. She weaponized their intimacy too, becoming cold and unresponsive in bed while giving Trevor everything. Then she'd blame Colton. "We don't have that spark anymore," she'd tell him. "There's no chemistry between us." What he didn't know was that she was saving all her passion for someone else. When he'd desperately ask what he could do to fix things, Amy would give him impossible standards. First, he needed more date nights. Then she wanted different types of dates. Then she demanded more spontaneity. Then she said he was putting too much pressure on her. Round and round. She kept moving the goalpost so he'd stay exhausted, always trying to figure out what she wanted, never quite succeeding. The truth was simple. She didn't want him to fix anything. She was getting everything she needed from Trevor, but she also wasn't ready to give up the financial security that Colton provided. Why should she have to choose? She was 24. She deserved to feel desired and excited. And if one man couldn't give her everything she needed, why was it wrong to get different things from different people? Trevor started pressuring her to leave Colton. He said they could be together for real, but Amy wasn't naive about this. Trevor worked retail. He barely made enough to cover his own bills. He lived with 3 roommates in a sketchy part of town. What kind of future could he offer her? She liked him for the excitement and validation, but she wasn't about to downgrade her entire lifestyle for someone who couldn't even afford to take her on nice dates. So Amy did what she did best. She lied to both of them. She told Trevor she was planning to leave Colton soon. She told Colton she wanted them to work on their relationship and get back to where they used to be. Both men believed her because she was a good liar when she needed to be. She was getting sloppy about covering her tracks, staying out later, making careless mistakes. Part of her wanted to get caught. She wanted the drama, the confrontation, the chance to finally force a decision instead of living in this exhausting limbo where she had her cake and was eating it too. When Trevor started hinting about them moving in together, Amy would laugh it off. But secretly, she was horrified. The fantasy was fun, but the reality would have been a nightmare. She couldn't go from Colton's comfortable apartment and financial security to Trevor's chaotic living situation. So she kept stringing him along, not ready to give up the excitement he brought to her life, but never willing to commit to actually being with him. She was living in a fantasy where she could have everything and face no consequences for any of it. Then her period was late, 3 days late, and Amy, who was usually regular as clockwork, felt a cold panic wash over her the moment she realized something was wrong. She drove to 3 different pharmacies because she was paranoid about running into someone who knew her. She needed privacy for this. She needed to be absolutely alone when she found out. Sitting on her bathroom floor at 6 in the morning, staring at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands, she was praying, actually praying, for a negative result. But deep down, she already knew. When that second line appeared, her first thought wasn't about the baby. It wasn't about becoming a mother, or the life she was about to bring into the world. Her first thought was about damage control. Pure calculation. She started doing the math in her head, trying to figure out the timeline, trying to calculate who the father might be. And her stomach dropped when she realized the dates lined up more with Trevor than with Colton. She hadn't been intimate with Colton in weeks. She'd been avoiding him, making excuses, being cold and distant. But with Trevor, There had been that one time when the condom broke. They were both too caught up in the moment to stop, too reckless to care about the consequences. Amy knew. On some level, she absolutely knew that this baby was probably Trevor's. But she also knew that admitting that would destroy any chance she had of keeping her life with Colton intact. So she did what she always did. She started planning. How could she handle this to minimize the damage to herself? How could she spin this to her advantage? Her first idea was to cut off contact with Trevor completely and try to initiate intimacy with Colton to blur the timeline. But it was too late. The timeline wouldn't work. They hadn't been intimate in too long. There was no way to make this math work. Then Colton's friends saw her with Trevor at a coffee shop. That's when everything started to fall apart. When Colton confronted her about cheating, Amy went into crisis mode. She minimized the affair, made it sound like a brief mistake, a moment of weakness that meant nothing. But Colton wasn't buying it. His anger was cold. His disappointment was crushing. So Amy made a desperate choice. She dropped the pregnancy bomb right in the middle of his anger, using it like a weapon to shift the entire conversation. Suddenly, they weren't talking about her betrayal anymore. They were talking about a baby. She watched his face change. Fury to shock to this cold, calculated expression she'd never seen before. Amy started crying. She told him how scared she was, how much she needed him, how this could be a fresh start for them, for their family. She swore up and down that the baby was his. She conveniently left out the part about the condom breaking with Trevor. She was betting everything, and I mean everything, on Colton's love for her being stronger than his anger about the cheating. In her mind, men were supposed to protect and provide for the women they loved. If he really loved her, he would get over the cheating and focus on their future family. That was the deal, wasn't it? But Colton didn't fall into her trap. Instead of breaking down or begging her to work things out like she expected, he got scary calm. He told her to pack her things and leave. He wanted nothing to do with her until paternity was established. He wanted a DNA test. And he wanted answers. When Amy tried to argue, when she used tears and manipulation, he just stared at her with this dead, empty expression and repeated himself. Pack your things and get out. Amy was genuinely shocked that he was kicking her out while she was pregnant and scared. Where was his compassion? Where was his sense of responsibility? Even if he was angry about the cheating, shouldn't his priority be making sure his pregnant girlfriend was safe and cared for? She tried every manipulation tactic she could think of. Crying about being scared and alone, reminding him of their 4 years together, promising she'd end things with Trevor and be the girlfriend he deserved. Nothing worked. Colton had apparently grown a backbone, and nothing she said would change his mind. Amy moved in with her best friend and started planning what she called her comeback strategy. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She was still convinced that this baby had to be Colton's. The timeline was sketchy, sure, but miracles happened, didn't they? Maybe she miscalculated. Maybe the dates were closer than she thought. She had to believe that because the alternative was too horrible to consider. That she'd destroyed her entire future for someone who couldn't even provide for her. So Amy started researching the most expensive pregnancy options she could find. Luxury midwife services. High-end doula packages. Organic everything. Prenatal massage therapy. The works. She told herself it was all necessary for the baby's health. But the truth was more complicated. If this baby was going to be Colton's, then he was going to pay for all of it. And if she was going to be pregnant and miserable, she might as well get the VIP treatment. Part of her was also thinking that the more expensive everything was, the more guilty he'd feel later about making her handle it alone. She wanted him to see those bills and realize what a monster he was for abandoning his pregnant girlfriend. When Colton agreed to pay for everything after paternity was confirmed, Amy took that as permission to go absolutely wild with the spending. Designer maternity clothes. The most expensive prenatal vitamins she could find. Weekly spa treatments for pregnancy stress. She justified it all as necessary for the baby's health. She was also spreading her version of the story to everyone who would listen. Poor her. Pregnant and abandoned by a boyfriend who couldn't forgive one moment of weakness. She made sure to leave out the part about the affair lasting months. She focused on how cruel he was being to an expectant mother. Most people were sympathetic, especially the women. They told her that real men step up when their women are pregnant. that Colton was showing his true colors by prioritizing his ego over his child's well-being. Amy collected every supportive comment like ammunition. She was building her case for when she'd eventually confront him again. Meanwhile, she was still in contact with Trevor, but she kept his financial situation vague. When people asked who the baby's father was, she'd say things like, "It's complicated," or, "He's not in a position to help right now." She couldn't let anyone know that the potential alternative father was a broke retail worker. That would make her look even worse. Trevor kept asking what they were going to do if the baby was his. Amy would always deflect or change the subject because honestly, she hadn't even considered it seriously. In her mind, this baby had to be Colton's. Anything else would ruin everything she'd worked for. The medical bills started piling up, but Amy wasn't worried because she was so sure everything would work out in her favor. Every expensive treatment, every luxury service, every premium option was an investment in her future with Colton once he realized he was going to be a father. Then pregnancy complications started developing, and Amy needed emergency care. She was rushed to the hospital, and for a moment she almost felt vindicated. This was serious. This was life or death. Surely now Colton would see how wrong he was to abandon her during such a critical time. But even when the doctors told her the baby might not make it, even when everything was on the line, Colton remained firm. He wanted to wait for the DNA results before getting involved. Amy couldn't understand how he could be so heartless, so cold, so willing to risk his own child's life over his wounded pride. But the DNA results came back. Colton wasn't the father. When Amy saw those words, she felt like her entire world collapsed. The baby was Trevor's. Instead of accepting responsibility for the mess she'd created, Amy went into denial. This had to be wrong. The test had to be faulty. There had to be some mistake because her entire plan depended on this baby being Colton's. When the second test confirmed the same results, Amy shifted into desperate manipulation mode. She called Colton crying, begging him to reconsider. She told him that DNA didn't matter because they'd built a life together. He could still choose to be this baby's father. She reminded him of their 4 years together, all their plans, all their dreams. She genuinely believed that if she could just find the right words, the right emotional appeal, she could convince him to overlook the paternity issue and step up anyway. That's what love was supposed to be, right? Choosing someone despite their flaws? But Colton was completely unmoved. He told her he felt sorry for her situation, but it wasn't his responsibility to fix the consequences of her choices. When she tried to guilt him about abandoning a helpless baby, he calmly pointed out that Trevor was the father and should be the one stepping up. That's when reality crashed into Amy like a truck. Trevor, working retail, living paycheck to paycheck, barely able to cover his own expenses, was supposed to help her with over $40,000 in medical bills. Amy started panicking about the money for the first time. But instead of accepting that she'd created this situation, she got angry at everyone else for failing her. She was furious at Colton for being so heartless, at Trevor for being broke and useless, at the medical system for being so expensive, at everyone except herself. She enlisted her family to help pressure Colton. She painted herself as a victim who made one mistake and deserved forgiveness and support. Her mom and sister started calling Colton, telling him he was being cruel and vindictive. Real men don't abandon women in their time of need, they said, regardless of paternity. But Colton had apparently grown a backbone. He told her family that their daughter's choices had consequences. It wasn't his job to rescue her from them. Amy was so angry she could barely see straight. When Trevor finally stepped up and acknowledged paternity, Amy thought maybe things would work out. But then she learned exactly how broke he really was. His monthly income wouldn't even cover one of her hospital bills, let alone the ongoing expenses of raising a child. She felt trapped between two men who were both failing her in different ways. Colton had the means to help, but chose not to. Trevor wanted to help, but was basically useless financially. Neither of them was willing to do what needed to be done to fix her situation. 6 months later, everything fell apart completely. Screenshots of her private messages got leaked online. Her friend's boyfriend had been saving everything she'd said about her strategy to get Colton back, including some really unflattering comments about Trevor that sounded worse out of context. Suddenly, everyone in their social circle could see exactly how she'd been planning and manipulating the whole situation. Instead of having sympathy for a struggling single mother, they all turned on her like she was a monster. Her family found out about all the lies she'd told them, about how long the affair really lasted, about how she'd been planning to trap Colton with a baby that wasn't even his. They were disgusted. They cut off all support, financial and emotional. Amy lost her job because the drama followed her to work. Her boss decided she was too much of a liability. Now she's stuck living with her aunt who treats her like a burden, working minimum wage jobs that barely cover basic expenses, watching her credit get destroyed by medical bills she can't pay. The bankruptcy paperwork is sitting on her kitchen table waiting to be filed. She'll be financially ruined before she turns 25. Trevor moved to Houston to escape all the drama and get a fresh start, leaving her completely alone with a baby she never really wanted in the first place. But the worst part? Watching Colton thrive without her. He got promoted at work. He started going to therapy. He began posting pictures of himself traveling, looking genuinely happy for the first time in years. Then he started dating this woman who is everything Amy pretended to be. Supportive, encouraging, actually interested in his hobbies. She comments sweet things on all his posts, shows up to his work events, acts like the perfect girlfriend that Amy never bothered to be. Last month, Amy found out they're engaged. Seeing that ring on her finger made her want to scream. That should have been her ring, her future, her financial security. Instead, she's stuck in a nightmare life that feels like punishment for one mistake. Everyone keeps telling her she needs to take responsibility and learn from this experience. But Amy is tired of being blamed. Yes, she cheated. But Colton was neglecting her emotionally. Yes, she lied about paternity. But she was scared and desperate. Yes, she spent money she couldn't afford, but Colton promised to pay for everything. She genuinely doesn't understand why she's the only one being held accountable when everyone else made choices that contributed to this mess. The baby deserves better than the life Amy can give her. But she's stuck now, and there's no way out. She looks at other women her age posting about their happy relationships and stable lives, and she feels like she's been cheated out of everything she deserved. Maybe she made some mistakes, but she didn't deserve to have her entire future destroyed over it. Colton moved on and found happiness like she never existed. And Amy is left dealing with the consequences. If he really loved her the way he claimed, he would have fought for their relationship instead of throwing 4 years away the moment things got complicated. But apparently, his love came with conditions. And now she has to live with the results of trusting someone who abandoned her when she needed him most. This is where our story ends, but this is also where the real lessons begin. What Amy didn't understand, what took her losing everything to realize, is that love doesn't fix the consequences of deception. Loyalty doesn't erase betrayal, and no amount of manipulation can change the truth of what we've done. Colton made a choice to protect himself, and that choice, as painful as it was the right one. I'm Emma, and I share these stories with you because they teach us something crucial about who we are when no one is watching. They remind us that the choices we make in moments of weakness can echo for the rest of our lives. If you found this story as compelling as I do, please hit that like button, share this video with friends who need to hear it, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this one. These are the real human experiences that shape us. These are the consequences that matter. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.